Trainsim Germany made a good name for themselves with their Vossloh G6, Mittenwaldbahn, and Deutsche Bahn BR218 add-ons in Trainsim World, so I had high hopes for their second route, which turned out to be the Mittenwaldbahn, Garmisch-Partenkirchen to Innsbruck. I initially thought this looked particularly interesting, because it's another cross-border route between Germany and Austria. And instead of being yet another modern image route, this one is set in 1989. The Mittenwaldbahn was released for Trainsim World 5 on the 12th of February 2025. It's in the same position as a lot of other TSW routes, in the sense that it is a remake of a route that already exists in Train Simulator Classic, but the original TS version is set in 2016 as opposed to 1989. While I have wanted to see Garmisch-Partenkirchen in TSW for a long time, I would have preferred the town to be included as part of a route going up to München instead of down to Innsbruck. When WCML Preston to Carlisle was released, I initially thought that would be the only instance of a TSW route costing more than 57 New Zealand dollars, but I have since been proven wrong. I thought $57 was bad enough for a TSW route, but $64.49 is just ridiculous, especially when you consider the fact that the base game is around $71, but that presents much better value for money because it comes with 3 routes as opposed to 1. In case it wasn't obvious, I did not buy the Mittenwaldbahn on day 1. Instead, I waited until I could get it on a discount, and paid $51.59 for my copy. It was 20% off during the Steam Summer Sale of late June 2025. As for route length, the Mittenwaldbahn is only 58 kilometres or 36 miles long. Starting out from Garmisch-Partenkirchen at the northern end, you're initially in Germany, or, as it was still known in 1989, West Germany. Then between Mittenwaldbahn and Scharnitz, you'll come across the border crossing. As for motive power, the Mittenwaldbahn comes with 2 electric locomotives, although one of them has already appeared in 3 previous add-ons, namely Bahnstrecke Salzburg to Rosenheim, the Pfälzische Ludwigsbahn Mannheim to Kaiserslautern, and a lazy gameplay pack for Kinzigtalbahn Frankfurt to Fulda. The new addition is the Österreichische Bundesbahnen Class 1020, also known as Krokodil, while the recycled locomotive is the BR111, albeit in a backdated condition and wearing the older Deutsche Bundesbahn blue and cream livery this time. Thinking back to the Österreichische Bundesbahnen Class 1020, these engines were built between 1940 and 1956, originally for Deutsche Reichsbahn as their Class E94. Out of the 200 examples built, 44 were transferred to Austria in the early 1950s, where they remained in service until the mid-1990s. Incidentally, TSG have since released another variant of the Österreichische Bundesbahnen Class 1020, now modified as the Deutsche Bundesbahn BR194. The add-on also includes some new rolling stock and a 1984-era timetable for the Ring-Rhein-Strecke Mainz to Koblenz route, although the route is actually set in 1997. As for price, the BR194 Rail Tour Pack costs 36 New Zealand dollars at full price. I'm not prepared to pay that much money for something that doesn't interest me as much as, say for instance, the Class 86, which costs the same as the BR194, so I'm waiting for a sale before buying the BR194 pack for myself. Thinking back to the Mittenwaldbahn, The included rolling stock is mostly just repainted coaches or wagons that we already had with previous add-ons, including the N-Wagen coaches, now in a striking silver livery, along with the TADGS 959 and Siemens 708 freight wagons, and what appear to be the same Trans-Europe Express coaches we already had with Link Rheinstrecke, albeit in a different livery. There's also the ES50 four-wheeler, but we already had this wagon with the Mittenwaldbahn, and the only rolling stock included with the Mittenwaldbahn that was actually new to TSW is the RMMS 663 freight wagon. I was surprised to see that the Österreichische Bundesbahn in Class 1020 doesn't have a seat for the driver, but she does have a fully modelled machine room through which you can walk. Another noteworthy aspect of this locomotive is her use of a whistle instead of a horn. As I expected, the Class 1020 is harder to drive than locomotives built more recently. Something that still throws me off is the brake lever, which has shutdown, as opposed to the normal release setting, past running and overcharge. I've found that it's too easy to push the brake lever past running and straight into shutdown, and something tells me that you're not supposed to do that. Curiously, this locomotive also has a reverser lock button, which must be pressed in order to set the master switch in reverse. Another unusual thing in the cab is the power controller, which looks more like the helmsman's wheel on a ship than any kind of railway component. As for the BR111, I find her throttle setup to be a bit confusing. The lever has run down, hold, and run up settings in a similar manner to the Class 86 and Class 87, which have tap changes, but then there's a conventional smooth range between 0 and 100% power. I think I've got the gist of how to drive the BR111, but even then, this locomotive is not much easier to drive than the Class 1020. Incidentally, I can't find a tutorial for the BR111 buried in journey mode, which is where I thought it would be. As you drive along the line, you'll be dealing with lots of tight curves and gradients that get as steep as 1 in 26. The gradient changes quite frequently, especially between Garmisch-Partenkirchen and Scharnitz, so you'll need to keep an eye on the throttle and brakes and adjust them accordingly. As for speed limits, they're normally either 40 or 60 km per hour, and only get as high as 80. On the surface, timetable mode appears to feature 104 playable services for the Österreichische Bundesbahn in Class 1020, and only 61 services for the Deutsche Bundesbahn BR111. Most of the 1020's services are either short shunting manoeuvres, split into multiple parts, or both, and not many of them cover the full route. Technically, this locomotive only has 51 playable services, if we count the multi-parters combined as whole services. As for the BR111, she only has 45 services if you count the multi-parters combined, and 10 of them are only short runs between Garmisch-Partenkirchen and Mittenwald. Incidentally, I haven't got the Salzburg to Rosenheim route, the gameplay pack for Frankfurt to Fulda, or the Mannheim to Kaiserslautern route, so the Deutsche Bundesbahn Blue and Cream is the only variant of the BR111 in my collection. Apparently, the engine included with the Mittenwaldbahn is an improved version of the red BR111, but I don't know what the improvements are, nor can I pass judgment on the previous versions. Additional layers are available if you've got the BR365 diesel and BR103 electric, which are included with the Niedertalbahn and Link-Rheinstrecke routes respectively. The BR365 only has 5 playable services on the Mittenwaldbahn, in order to represent a daily freight service between Garmisch-Partenkirchen and Mittenwald, while the BR103 only has 2 playable services, and mostly appears as AI-only traffic in Innsbruck. Of course, the Österreichische Bundesbahnen Class 1116 Taurus and Class 4024 Talent 1 from the Semmeringbahn add-on do not appear on the Mittenwaldbahn because they're far too modern for the time period of this route. Another locomotive that you won't see here in timetable mode is the BR193 Vectron, which means I can't do the traditional musical Vectron segments this time. Punch it! As good as this add-on is overall, it is by no means perfect. A few things I don't like about this add-on include the lack of an accessible machine room on the BR111, no building interiors modelled at most stations, a slight modelling error in the underpass at Innsbruck Hauptbahnhof, the BR111's horn not working for some reason, and these buildings between Mittenwald and the border crossing, which look like they were just haphazardly scattered about in the editor. It's interesting to note that the interior of the roundhouse at Innsbruck is fully detailed and accessible, but the same can't be said for the roundhouse at Garmisch-Partenkirchen. Meanwhile, the NPCs awkwardly glide from the coaches down to the platform, and this looks just about as natural as the performances from actors in television advertising these days, especially that insufferable character at a certain used car dealership in New Zealand. On the subject of NPCs, I'm still seeing this issue where they appear in the coaches when the train is supposed to be on an empty shunt. And now for some random observations I made while exploring the route. You can see animated cows in the line-side field between Clay and Mittenwald. These animals are neither small nor far away from the railway line. In any case, I'm not sure why the developers went to the effort of making these animals move in a realistic way, but it adds just that little bit more to the immersion regardless. Some stations feature this neat little timetable poster, which is clearly legible and corresponds with the services in timetable mode. You can find what look like cherry blossoms throughout the route, and these trees remind me of the blossoms, as opposed to the stereophonics, that we've got round my way. The overall route has a very similar colour palette to the Niedertalbahn, and I would argue that these two routes should be the gold standard for scenery in all future TSW routes. Take notes, Dovetail. Come to think of it, has anyone else noticed that there's a, currently unbroken, theme of always featuring Germany and Austria when TSW developers make a cross-border route? Personally, I wouldn't mind seeing something different if we ever get another cross-border route in the game. One suggestion I have is the REX 8 line from Vienna, Austria to Bratislava, Slovakia, complete with the Österreichische Bundesbahn in Class 2016. The Mittenwaldbahn may be a quiet route, but I would argue that the quietness is not as much of an issue here as it is on CN Oakville subdivision and barely captures the spirit of steam. Two routes where the Spartan timetable is unrealistic and completely ruins the experience. In the case of TSG's route, the low amount of services feels quite appropriate for a single-track line serving small mountain villages. Innsbruck Hauptbahnhof is the only part of the route that I feel could be a little busier. Despite knowing barely anything about the railways in Germany and Austria as they were in the late 1980s, I would still consider TrainSim Germany's Mittenwaldbahn to be a good route, even if mainly for the scenery. But also the locomotives are pretty good as well, especially the Österreichische Bundesbahn in Class 1020. Although I give this route an 8 out of 10, I am still of the opinion that no TSW route is worth as much as $64.49 NZD at full price, regardless of how good it may be. If you're interested in trying out the Mittenwaldbahn for yourself, I highly recommend waiting until a sale drops and buying it then. If you've made it to the end of the video, you win an average bloke who, for some reason, makes physical contact with a drinking establishment using his tongue. It's Joe Public